Hello, I'm Ann Levette, Superintendent of Savannah Chatham County Public Schools. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you today as we share some additional resources for dealing with COVID-19 during this time in our community. I'm very proud to share that we are hosting this panel discussion today with Savannah State University. Both entities in our community deal with schooling, and we have a number of resources that are available to help us all during this time. You'll see those resources on the screen, and we encourage you to take advantage of all of the services that are available to help each of us during this historic period. Today, you'll meet a distinguished panel of community experts who will offer us some insights and some advice on how we can manage COVID-19, not only today, but far beyond. We appreciate the opportunity to share this resource with you, and we look forward to hearing your feedback. At this time, I'm pleased to introduce to some of you, but perhaps just remind a few of you, of our very strong community supporter, Ms. Dawn Baker. She will be facilitating the panel discussion this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Dr. Levette. It is really an honor to share with all of you today, and I would like to start off by thanking the Savannah Chatham County Public School System, but also Savannah State University and the interim president, Dr. Ballard Washington, for their hard work and just coming up with this idea of doing something like this in a time like this. It really is a fantastic idea for all of us to come together and talk about COVID-19 and, of course, the way it is affecting education. This school year will certainly be a challenge for everyone, for the educators who are having to learn some new technology and really how to relate to children on a different level. It'll also be a challenge for our young people who are learning about the internet, perhaps some of them for the very first time, those kindergartners and lower grade students, and also learning about discipline when you can't always be seen on the one screen. Our younger students are also being introduced to some different caregivers in some respects, in that parents have to go back to work, so someone else may be monitoring them going to school, taking care of their lessons, or also going to a different facility where someone is actually helping out. And let's please thank our parents. They have certainly been wonderful, rolling with the punches with all the changes that have come about. But I just ask that you be patient a little while longer, because all of our educators are making the very best decisions they possibly can to educate your children well and keep them safe in this environment. And they're relying on many of our experts in our community. And as we know, with COVID-19, from day to day, it seems as if many of the rules have certainly changed. I would like to begin by introducing our panel that you'll hear from this afternoon. Let's begin with Dr. Ann Levette, who you just heard a few seconds ago, who is the superintendent of the Savannah Chatham County Schools. She has been in that position for more than 3 years now. She has an award-winning career that landed her in leadership positions in different public school systems, not just Chatham County, and universities around the country, including the Child Study Center at Yale University College of Medicine. Dr. Levette also consulted on significant reform and community development efforts in several international communities. She's a published author and nationally recognized speaker, and she has a long list of awards for educational achievement, leadership, as well as community service. Seated right next to her is Dr. Kimberly Ballard Washington, who is the interim president of Savannah State University. She has been there for a little bit more than a year. Dr. Ballard Washington has practiced law for 20 years and held leadership positions with the University System of Georgia, the Board of Regents, and the University of Georgia. She has also served as interim president at Fort Valley State University and Albany State University. Ballard Washington was also named to Georgia Trend Magazine's 40 Under 40 list. Seated next to Dr. Levette is Dr. Lawton Davis. You see him on TV more than you see me, actually, these days since this pandemic began. He is a proud Georgian who attended Furman University and the Medical College of Georgia. He's board certified in internal medicine, and Dr. Davis had a private practice in Dublin, Georgia for about 15 years. Then he joined public health as the district health director of the South Central Health District back in 1998 and made his transition to the Coastal Health District where we all live in July of 2016, as he said, just in time to evacuate for Hurricane Matthew. Mrs. Felicia Anderson is a licensed clinical social worker committed to young people and mental health. Her clinical work and advocacy for them has been a catalyst to develop mentally healthy, resilient children for the past 10 years in Michigan, Ohio, and Georgia. She has worked many roles in different areas of the country, including right here with the Savannah Chatham schools, in a position that is called the District Behavior Interventionist. She's currently the program manager for Gateways Georgia Apex program, which is a school-based mental health program that is currently in several of Chatham County schools and some other school districts around Georgia. Thank you all so much for being with us today. We look forward to hearing all of your advice and insight about COVID-19. As we all know, COVID-19 is certainly a serious virus. It has destroyed many families and taken lives, including a 7-year-old little boy who lived right here in Savannah, Chatham County. So we know it can be dangerous, even deadly for children of all ages. There are more survivors of this condition than also people who lose their lives. And a lot of people want to celebrate that, but we also know it is really almost a luck of the draw what strain or what degree of COVID-19 you get. For instance, my friend and co-worker, Lindsay Goff, she is by far right now one of the strongest people I've ever met. At 27 years old, she was diagnosed with COVID-19, and she is about on day 50 right now on her road to recovery. And she has quite a story to tell that she's been very open about because she wants to make sure others don't get sick. So please take a moment and listen to her story.
Hey guys, my name is Lindsay Goff. I'm the weekend sports anchor and reporter at WTOC. I'm also a COVID-19 survivor. I was covering the PGA Tour on Hilton Head Island, and I turned 27 on June 19th, and on June 20th, I didn't know it at the time, but I interviewed someone who had coronavirus. They were from a hotspot, and I wound up getting COVID-19 myself. Once I was able to get tested, it confirmed that I had all the symptoms except for a fever and shortness of breath. I had cough, body aches, chills, muscle pains, brain fog, fatigue, cold symptoms, you name it. I quarantined for my 2 weeks, and as I was preparing to go back to work the week of July 4th, I started having severe abdominal pain. A few days later, I wound up going to the emergency room where they told me I would be taken back for emergency surgery on July 9th around midnight, so July 9th into the 10th. I woke up with a 6-inch scar on my stomach and 17 staples. They removed my appendix, my cecum, and part of my small intestines. They said that my body was fighting so hard against COVID-19 that it kind of wreaked havoc on my body. And I got out of the hospital on July 21st, 11 days later. I've been at home recovering ever since, so please just be careful. I'm not an at-risk age group, and it still drastically affected me and my life. Wear your mask, social distance, use hand sanitizer, and be as careful as possible. I wouldn't wish that on anyone, and we want you guys to have a good school year.
I want to thank you very much, Lindsay, for sharing your story. I think that it will resonate with young people and especially some of the young teachers that you all may have on your campuses as well. So, of course, we want to wish everybody a healthy and safe school year. Let's begin our discussion. It is entitled Educating in the COVID-19 Environment. My first question is for Dr. Ann Levette. The district students are now learning virtually and will continue to do that throughout the end of this year especially. How are they handling the virtual learning? Have you been in touch with your students and parents?
And some of our students are doing extremely well, and they are enjoying the virtual environment. They certainly are feeling the difference between the spring and now. Things are much more organized, and they have settled in. They, though, like us, still want to be face-to-face with teachers and other supporters, and we want the same for them. They stay in touch, they let us know, particularly our youngest learners and our seniors, our class of 2021, very eager to get back in, and all those in between. They're adjusting well, they're most adaptable. Most of the time, we find that children are much more adaptable than us seasoned adults, but they would like to be back with us, and we'd like for them to be back with us as well.
We also know, Dr. Levette, that there have been some issues throughout our country because of internet connectivity and Wi-Fi service. So I commend you all with all the resources that you're offering to our students and parents right now. Could you remind people of some of those resources that are available for them?
I think it's actually been a miracle. We wanted to go one-to-one, meaning one device per student. We wanted to do that for some time now, and the pandemic allowed us to do that. Our board was very supportive of our request. We were able to get not only the devices, of course, there are a few supply chain issues, but they're coming in very slowly. But nonetheless, most of the students who need a device have one. We're also able to purchase a learning management system so that there's one platform that we use across the school district for all grades to have access to instruction. For those who need Wi-Fi, we this week rolled out our Wi-Fi buses, so you'll see them all across the community. They have an established schedule, so if you have Wi-Fi issues, you can pull up to a Wi-Fi bus and connect that way. We also have individual hotspots that we've also issued. We also have a campaign that we have launched so that we can purchase additional devices and hotspots as well. In addition to that, we have a tech team that will go out and help you get your technology up and going. And we also have our great counselors and other supporters who help people just kind of get through those processes. So that's just a little snapshot. But one thing that we remind people to do, in addition to meal services, which we also provide by bus, we just say to them, call us and we will provide a response. We're not always able to settle everything, but we are able to give you some solution, connect you and get you going. So it's not just the technology, it's also the other emotional support for our parents and grandparents and older siblings who are just trying to help us get through this time period.
Well, thank you. Such a great job you all doing to help our children. A very different story over at Savannah State University, where students are actually on campus and going to class in a traditional way as well as online. Let's talk to Dr. Ballard Washington now about how that is going. And honestly, I just couldn't even imagine how you can keep college kids away from each other, but you all seem to be finding a way to manage that.
Well, we are definitely trying to manage that. We are having classes online. Our students have been back since the 17th of August, and they have face-to-face classes, hybrid classes, and online classes. And I don't think there's probably a single student that has all face-to-face. It is just a different way of doing things. It's a mixture. There are some instances in which all students' classes were moved online. And sometimes that was the preference of that student, but other times it was because their faculty member could only teach in an online environment due to health concerns and so forth. And so we are trying to make it work. But yes, keeping students separate is a very difficult task. College typically isn't about just learning in the classrooms. It's about learning about oneself, the social experience that you have when you're on a college campus. And so that looks very different this year. We're trying to be creative. Our student affairs team is working diligently to create opportunities. They're having Zoom parties and, with DJ and everything. But it is working, and the residence halls are participating greatly in this and making sure that the students have activities to do. We want our students to stay on campus and stay safe. One of the things that's helping us keep them safe is that we do have mandatory masks on campus. And so the city, of course, has the ordinance, but we also have mandatory masks on campus so that our students, when they're in the classrooms, when they're any place on campus, other than in their private rooms, they'll be wearing their masks. And so that is very helpful, and hopefully it's going to aid us in keeping our students, staff, and faculty safe.
That's a wonderful idea, and we do know that a lot of thought has gone into all these programs, and I really commend you all for offering all those options to your students now. But we do know that, unfortunately, someone is probably going to test positive at some point, and we hope they never do. You all, I know that you have a plan in place in case there may be some students or a faculty member who tests positive.
So we've had to put that plan in place, and actually we have several students who have tested positive. And those students, once they test positive, are placed in isolation. And our dining services provides food service for them. Our student affairs leaders engage with them. including the mental health providers, the health center. We try to make sure that they are supported throughout the day, even though they have to be in an area alone. Isolation is not a fun place to be, and it's hard for us to handle that as adults. And again, we talked about the social environment for college students, so this is a little bit different for them having to spend time alone, and we're trying to make sure that they have what they need when they're having to be in that environment. But mental health does play a key role in that.
Right. Well, we know that this year will go down in history as one of the most unique and different school years that we've ever experienced in our lifetimes, and really anybody's lifetimes, honestly. Who are you ladies, as the top educators in your district as well as your university, who are you all turning to for that kind of support to help you make those decisions and just reassure you that everything is going to be okay?
We are very fortunate to have the kind of organizations and networks that we can talk with. So there's always someone else that's done it, or someone else that has an idea. So we have weekly sharing sessions with our local school district leaders. Mm-hmm. We also have coalitions that we have developed of like school districts, because I'm the 10th largest school district in the state of Georgia. Most of the others are in the Atlanta area. So I do meet with our local groups, Bryan, Effingham, the other counties around us. We have a great relationship. We talk about all the concerns that we have in common, but we also have relationships with the other school districts that are our size or larger. We share ideas, and we also watch to see what's happening with each other, so we don't want to make the same mistakes. We often talk about what are the pressures for our families and for our staff, and we share that information. I'm also very fortunate to be a part of a national school reopening task force. So I have the opportunity to hear from 85 of my other colleagues who are opening school districts across the United States. Some unionized, some not, some small, some rural, some city. So we have the opportunity to share there as well. We went virtual, so lots of other districts who are moving in that direction talk with us about, hey, what did you do? How did you do it? We share documents, we share processes. We all often watch each other's board meetings so that we can see how things are handled. So it's really very helpful. This is probably the most sharing we've ever done in my career across the United States. We also have some of our colleagues are international. We have a former employee who now lives in China. So she has been a part of our local task force to talk with us about what they've done in the reopening process in China. That's very helpful. She knows the Savannah community, she knows what we deal with, and she's also having that international experience that she's sharing with us. So it's been a great time of learning and drawing upon experts in the community. I don't have a week without engaging with Dr. Davis in the Department of Public Health, and also the State Department of Public Health. And our Department of Public Education has been really helpful as well. So we have a wide network, and I try to tap all of them.
So our experience is similar. First of all, we have a task force on campus that deals with COVID issues, and so they have been remarkable bringing issues to my attention and having a group that is on the ground actually dealing with the issues on a day-to-day basis. But as you know, Savannah State is a part of the University System of Georgia, and as such, all of the presidents are meeting on a weekly basis to discuss what's going on, what we're seeing from campus to campus, what issues may need to be addressed, and just having an outlet to see whether certain things that you're seeing on your campus may be happening somewhere else, and how it's being dealt with and so forth has been very helpful. But nationally, the Thurgood Marshall College Fund is a program that many historically black colleges and universities belong to, and they have been working to keep us all engaged and informed as to various opportunities and programs that exist to help through this. And so not only am I able to engage with the presidents here in the state of Georgia, but also the HBCUs around the country, and that's been very beneficial.
It's great to see that you all have that teamwork that's built in, that's being a great support to you with all your decisions. And a part of that team, we all know, is the Coastal Health District. It's a good time for us to talk to Dr. Lawton Davis about where we are in Chatham County when it comes to COVID-19.
Well, we seem to be moving in the right direction with most of the indicators we follow to indicate our ongoing level of community transmission. But I would caution that even though those indicators are moving in the right direction, they are still too high. So we still have work to do.
Dr. Davis, we also know that most people are recovering from this virus, which is a very good thing. But what are some of the long-term effects that may affect them in the future when it comes to their body as a result of the body fighting this kind of virus?
There are a lot of things that we don't like about the COVID virus. In fact, I can't think of very many things I do like about it. But as we're at about 6 months into this thing right now, and we learn more and more each day. One of the things that you've alluded to or asking about is the persistent or lingering effects. And I think that wasn't recognized early on. We all know about the acute illness, but more and more we're seeing people who have lingering effects from COVID. We know that the virus affects and infects cells throughout our body. It affects blood vessels, the brain, the heart, our gut, our major organs like the liver. So it affects pretty much everything. And of course, it preferentially seems to like the cells that line blood vessels, which obviously go throughout the body. So it's not a surprise that you may see a wide range of effects and symptoms and signs, like we heard testimony a little bit earlier. There's some smaller studies that have shown that as many as 70 to 80% of people have had persistent effects for up to a month following recovery. That's probably a little on the high side. There are some other ongoing surveillance studies that seem to indicate somewhere between at least 10 to 15% of people will have significant lingering effects from COVID-19, and this can be lingering from a severe case or from a very mild case. The four most common side effects or lingering persistent effects that have been reported are fatigue, just being tired, shortness of breath, achy joints, and what they describe, and I think she described, as brain fog. Other things are headache, vertigo, a sensation of twirling, anosmia or loss of sense of smell that seems to be persistent. Cardiorespiratory fitness, would kind of go along with that shortness of breath, but we're seeing cases where the virus has actually affected the heart and muscle, and people develop what we call a cardiomyopathy, where the muscle just becomes weak, and so each time it pumps, it doesn't pump as much blood. And then cognition, again, the brain fog, we know that it can affect the brain as well. And then I mentioned blood vessels. It, for some reason, seems to love the endothelial cells that line our blood vessels and causes clotting problems, which of course lead to some of the acute things, but also can lead to some chronic weakening of blood vessels and long-term problems as well.
Dr. Davis, we've gotten a lot of information about COVID-19 over the last 6-7 months now, and people still want to believe that children are not as affected and won't get sick at all. What are you all seeing as healthcare people when it comes to children and how they are dealing with COVID-19?
Well, initially, there was the thought that perhaps children were not as affected or infected as often. One of the theories out there was that they had not yet developed those ACE2 receptors that are present throughout our body and to which the spike protein attaches to let the virus gain entry. We now know that that's not the case, and that COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 seems to be an equal opportunity infector. It will infect you irregardless of your age, your race, or your ethnicity. We know that some ethnicities bear a larger burden of the disease, but that seems to be related more to socioeconomic conditions and factors rather than any inherent genetic difference amongst people. Genetically, we're all 99.998 the same. So those differences would likely be socioeconomic primarily rather than related to any genetic differences. So children, it is true that a smaller percentage of them will have a severe illness. They're much more likely to be asymptomatic. And yet we now also know that those asymptomatic children may actually have a higher viral load in their respiratory tract than do some older people who are very sick and in the hospital and even on a ventilator. And we also know and have confirmed that the younger population, including children, is likely the primary vector for ongoing community transmission. And you look at a kid, looks perfectly healthy and happy and totally asymptomatic, and yet he or she is infected and is able to, spread the virus and take it home to grandma and grandpa.
Very frightening. Thank you so much for sharing with us. But we also want to move on to mental health with Ms. Anderson. We do know that this pandemic is taking a mental toll, honestly, on all of us. But what are some things that parents can look out for with their children to see changes in them that maybe they need to talk to them themselves or perhaps even get some outside help for them?
Yes, so we know for a fact that this disease, virus, COVID-19 has affected a lot of us physically as well as mentally. And the impacts of that to our children, we are starting to do some research on how that's affected. Since we're in the midst of it all, there's not confirmed data, but we definitely have seen how school disruptions have increased anxiety and depression with our children. And so when I talk with parents and the community, I want to always make sure that, one, you give yourself some grace, right? Because we're all going through this, but also make sure that we are putting our detective hats on and really trying to figure out what is going on with our children, because sometimes we like to correct behavior before we connect with the child. And so some of the signs and symptoms you may want to look for in your child is those signs and symptoms of anxiety and depression. And it looks different with our kids than it may present itself with me as an adult. Irritability, frustration, anger, those are signs of anxiety and depression in a child and how it will manifest. A child may not tell you, I'm sad, or I'm confused, or this virus has affected me mentally. They may not use those words, but they may show you through their behaviors. So they may act out, may not want to engage in behaviors or activities that they typically would have liked in the past. They may want to isolate, or they may appear sad or down. So those are some indicators that there may be something else going on. They may have trouble with staying focused and staying task-oriented because they may have other thoughts going on. And specifically, in Savannah and Chatham County Public Schools, our children were in school in March, went to spring break, and never came back. And so they had a schedule that they were used to. They had their teachers and their peers. So they had some loss. And I didn't realize how impactful that loss was until I seen it in my 2-year-old. She hadn't seen her daycare teacher for months, and so I didn't think anything about it until she seen her and how excited she was. And so that's a 2-year-old. Imagine a 16-year-old who is, hanging out with friends and, spending that time, because that's what teenagers like to do. They prefer spending time with their friends. And so that being taken away, or that third grader who may come from a home environment that may not always be the safest. And so they have to stay in that home environment. They can't use school as a escape from that. So, being mindful of those symptoms and signs of depression, and understanding that depression and anxiety is not always a child presenting as if they're nervous or if they're sad. It can look like other things as well.
What are some things that parents can do to ease this strain and anxiety for their children? Is there anything that we can do that, doesn't require professional help? And at what point do you realize as a caregiver or a parent that you may need to call on someone like you to help?
Yeah, so we always, throughout this entire process, and I'm calling it a process because we're processing how to deal with COVID-19. We want to make sure, again, we give ourselves grace, give ourselves patience. Everyone in the world is experiencing this for the first time, right? So being allowed to, have some flexibility, but also keeping some type of routine going on in your household. So if you're doing virtual learning, maybe wake up a little bit earlier, have breakfast as a family, decompress and talk in the evening about how the day was going. And it may not be how was school or how was class. How did you feel about that? Or what has been some things on your mind, or how can I help you or talk more with you about what is going on? So just having those conversations. And the theme, and I heard this, about a week or so ago, and I said, I'm going to take this and run with it, is really, really, really making sure that before we correct, we connect with our child. Learning virtually is new to a lot of the children and a lot of the parents. And one thing about children, they're very resilient. Like Dr. Levesque said, they bounce back, right? Sometimes it takes us a little pushing and shoving. And so, being mindful that this is new for your child and for you will help them know that if I don't get it right the first time, or if something happens, it's okay. And being able to allow them that room for error. And so, with a lot of the frustration that is going on with this, we, kind of may lash out with our kids, or may, well, they're not paying attention, or they're not focusing on their schoolwork, or this, that, and the third. Well, a lot of those same signs of anxiety and depression also looks like ADHD, right? And so maybe he's not focusing because he's scared, or he's thinking about other things. And it may not necessarily be that he doesn't want to do the work or not concentrating on his Zoom call. It may be his mind is in a different place. So let's connect with our child and see what's going on, because they may be able to share, and then we can move forward instead of just automatically trying to correct the behavior.
Right. Some very good advice there. To all of you, as you look back over this last 7-8 months now, what do you think in the midst of all this turmoil has inspired you most? If anyone would like to share that. Because you all have had to deal with a lot of people of all ages.
I'll go first. I've been inspired about the creativity of it all, of how families have done so many cool things in their home, whether it was like the front porch video shoots and photo shoots, how creative teachers and therapists and mental health providers have been with connecting via telehealth and Zoom and doing lessons. I've seen so many families really engage and connect with their families more. We're in the house, right? We might as well make some fun out of it. And doing some home activities that we may have been too busy to do in the past. So although it has been very tragic, I have seen a lot of families getting back to the basics and really connecting with each other in the home.
That makes a big difference. Anyone else? Dr. Davis?
I've actually been very pleased with the level of openness and cooperation with the elected officials in Chatham County and pretty much everywhere throughout Chatham County. I think that's been very refreshing that, they're, even if they don't always agree with what you say, they're open to hearing, what we have to say and listen and at least let that enter the mix as they're making decisions. That's been very refreshing.
Very good. Yes, sir.
I'd have to just say the creativity and collaboration, and the reverting to depending on each other, the diverting to sharing meals, the diverting to winding down, reflecting, and reaching out to someone else, I think is allowed us to sometimes slow down and connect and touch, which is what we now crave. We crave being able to hug and kiss and say, "Oh my God, it's been so long since I've seen you." And we can't do that now, so I think we have a greater value for it than we had before. And I appreciate the resilience of people. We've seen people really lose loved ones, but still remain inspired and more committed to helping us all get through this together. And I think that's really important. So I love the creativity. We've come up with lots of wonderful ways to celebrate each other that don't allow contact, but we've also connected in other ways that I think are really important.
You know, my thought is it's the collaboration. And I can just look at Savannah State University. Typically, faculty, staff, students, administration all have their own ways of doing things. And what I've seen over the last few months is us all coming together for the common goal of educating the students. The students are there. They want to remain. They don't want to have to go home like they did in March. And so they're vested in remaining. Faculty are dedicated and vested in teaching the students in a different way, but they're being creative, as you said, in coming up with ways to do that effectively. And that has really been quite interesting to see how everyone is able to come up with ways to do things differently, but get to that common goal of continuing the educational cycle. I will say the family time has been rewarding also. I personally had my kids here with me, my husband. We learned how to go crabbing. Wouldn't have done that in regular times, but we learned how to do certain things that are outside the norm, and it gave that time for families to be together. 7:00 at night, everybody's finished work, everybody's finished school. It was us being together, and we don't usually get that time.
That has really been a beautiful thing that I've heard from a lot of families is before all of this, it was almost like ships passing in the night. Everybody had their own schedule, their own lives, and when the whole world came to a halt, we had to realize that we had to exist together.
Yes.
And sometimes that can be scary. I always joke and tell people that please check on those of us who are extroverts like me. We are not okay not seeing our family and friends as much as we would like to. And even I've learned with myself is that there's a different way you are around people now, which I don't necessarily like, because it's almost like I'm a toucher, and so I'm so busy focused on trying not to touch you that I find myself with my arms folded, my hands in my pocket, because I don't want to do anything that will harm anyone else. But I do think that we're definitely all going to make it through this, and I would like to ask Dr. Dave, just put on the spot for a moment, what can we do now to continue to move in the right direction? I know that there are those 4 things that you constantly talk about, but I don't think people can hear it enough, because unfortunately we have a large segment of our population that believes that it's really kind of over because things have basically gone back to normal with businesses opening and them going back to work.
Right, but things are not yet back to normal. We still have ongoing community transmission. We know that some of the vaccines in development seem to elicit a very nice immune response, but we have no proof yet that that immune response is actually going to provide lasting immunity for the people that get the vaccine. We certainly hope that it will, but we don't know that yet. We don't know that they're going to be safe when they're given to a lot of people. And so I think we still have a long way to go with this virus. The things that we know work are, in fact, those things that you've just alluded to. We know that if we practice social distancing, that helps. And if we try to avoid gatherings, particularly gatherings that are indoors for any prolonged period of time, that helps. wearing a mask definitely helps. Washing your hands, using hand sanitizers definitely helps. And I think that we need to be cognizant of the fact that there are still opportunities where we can naturally sort of let our guard down. One of those will be coming up this weekend, which will be Labor Day weekend, along with several of the high schools playing their first football games. Perfect opportunity to get caught up in the moment and not be careful. I think that the Labor Day weekend, especially if we have good weather, would be a great opportunity, unfortunately, to see a resurgence in cases. If people are out and socializing and not following the 3 W's, as they say now, wear a mask, watch your distance, and wash your hands. But if we forget that, it won't take much, because there's still plenty of it out there. It won't take much to upset our apple cart and put us back where we were, 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Anyone else have anything they'd like to add?
I'd like to add, with the wearing the mask and socially distancing, one of the things that we see, I mentioned that we wear our mask on campus, so when our students are walking around, they have them. But I see them riding in cars with one another, and the masks are off. They do forget. I think we all do sometimes forget that we're in this moment. They get in the cars with each other, and they are considering that their friend group are safe. They don't recognize that those friends are with other friends and other people and exposed. And we do have to constantly be mindful that we are living in a different environment, and we need to constantly be vigilant. We can continue living our lives, but just do it differently.
I think for me, one of the pressure points is people would really like for us to return to March 10th, March 11th, March 12th, March 13th. And as much as people complained about the old system, now they have selective amnesia. And the old system was just perfect. We would like to return to that. I'd like for everyone to just recognize that returning students to a school environment invites other opportunities for spread of community transmission. No one is working in a way that is designed for students not to return. And we recognize that virtual learning is not optimal. However, we would like to be on the other side of this, be able to talk about it and share how we persisted. We are very resilient. We demonstrated that in April and in May. We demonstrated how resilient and how creative we are. We have to persist during this time period to bring 37,000 plus other people's children into a building invites opportunities that I don't wish to take. So I'm going to ask the community to do exactly what Dr. Davis, Dr. Ballard Washington, Ms. Anderson, and you have said. Let's tighten our belts, be persistent, make sure that we are following these safety guidelines so that children can return to school. It is the one thing I hear every day. I need you to open up the schools. What I don't want to have is to offer condolences to a family member or of a child or a family member of a colleague because we have sacrificed what we know works best for the convenience of now. So I'm going to ask all of the citizens of our community to do what we know is best so that we can slowly integrate our children back into our environment. I'm a very proud superintendent. I love visiting schools and kissing on the babies. That makes my day. When things get really out of control, I go visit and talk with someone who really is understanding what life's all about. And they happen to be often very small and much shorter than I am, but very, very wise. All children need love and care, but we cannot care for them if they are ill, and we cannot care for them if they're in a position of transmitting or receiving transmission. So it's really important for us to all, as a community, if we love our children the way I've seen us love on them, whether they're 2 or 22, we really need to do what we know is best, and that is to exercise good judgment, not sacrifice their future, our future, for the convenience of now.
I'd like to share one
Yes,
more
ma'am.
thing. And it kind of ties in with what Dr. Levet was saying. You know, we definitely need to make sure that we prioritize our children's needs first. But I also want to bring awareness to the month of September being National Suicide Awareness Month. Georgia is in the midst of having high suicide rates. And suicide is one of the top causes of death with our youth. So if you know a child, if you may be experiencing some suicidal thoughts or have a family member, please seek help. You're not alone. And 1-800-273-TALK is the National Suicide Prevention Line.
Say that slower again.
Yeah, I'm
one more time.
sorry. It's 1-800-273-TALK. It's the National Suicide Prevention Line. You can talk to someone there, and that can, help and support you through that. Another resource I'd like to share, specifically for Chatham County Public School System, is the Georgia APEX program. It's a school-based mental health program where we have partnered with Chatham County Public Schools. We have therapists, licensed clinicians that work directly in 7 of our schools that can provide therapy to your child. And we have switched, and we're doing it virtual too. So just because your child is home, that therapist can talk to them right across the screen and support them. And we're in several of the schools. So if you'd like more information about that program, please call 912-675-4012. And lastly is Georgia Crisis Access Line, and this is for young children, college students, anyone who may be experiencing a mental health crisis. Please reach out to them if you need to talk to someone or need to connect someone with a counselor. And that phone number is 1-800-715-4225. That's it.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful group of resources that you added to our wheelhouse for everyone. Dr. Davis, did I interrupt you? You weren't trying to say anything, were you? Okay. But just thank you so much, all of you. What a wonderful discussion we've had. And we just remind our parents we were responsible. We are socially distanced. No one is sitting next to each other. There are even plexiglass dividers between everyone. So we're doing our best to make sure that everyone is safe and healthy. I just want to thank again Dr. Ann Levet, Dr. Kimberly Ballard-Washington, Dr. Lawton Davis, Ms. Felicia Anderson, Lindsay Goff for sharing her story, for being so open and honest this afternoon. You all really did a magnificent job and gave us a lot of resources that all of us can think about as we continue to deal with this pandemic. And I'm sure your words of wisdom are going to help families, children, caregivers, neighbors to really get through this pandemic. Again, also, thank you to the Savannah-Chatham County School Board District, who did all this preparation, with a special note for Mr. Clyde Newton, Ms. Michelle Hodges, Ms. Stacy Jennings, and the lovely gentleman who did everything this afternoon. I don't remember his name, but it's done in love. It's important for them to do everything they did to make sure that we're in a safe environment and everything is clear for you. And I just want to leave you all with one thought before I turn this over to Dr. Kimberly Ballard-Washington for some closing remarks. It was Doe Zatamanta who said, "It is only in our darkest hours that we may discover the true strength of the brilliant light within ourselves that can never, ever be dimmed." So when you're feeling bewildered, just hold on. And with that, I'd like to leave you this afternoon with final statements from our Savannah State University interim president, Dr. Kimberly Ballard-Washington, for some closing remarks.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all of our panelists and Dr. Levet for co-hosting this with us and for allowing us to be here in this wonderful facility. COVID-19 has changed our world dramatically, but we know that change comes. We may be dark today, but light shall also come. We are learning how to deal with this. We will be different on the other side. We already are. We're seeing our value. We're being creative in how we do things. So long as we can work together and work consistently together, we will get through this. And our students, whether they be the 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, or even the 21-year-olds, They will be stronger because of what we do and the decisions that we make for our students today. Let's always keep in mind that we have young minds to mold, and we need parents, students to work with us to act in the best interest of these wonderful students.
Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you.